Good evening. Bienvenidos. Welcome, everybody. I'm Garo LaMarche. I am the chair of the board of directors of the New Press, the progressive nonprofit publishing house, which has been publishing for more than 20 years, various social justice texts from the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander to the first publications on critical race theory, to being, as of last week, the publisher of a Nobel Prize winner, Abdul Razak Gurna of Tanzania, of Zanzibar, I'm sorry. So we have specialized for a long time in bringing voices into the public sphere, into the public debate that are too often ignored by mainstream publishers. And we are the very proud publishers of the book that we're launching and celebrating tonight, If We Want to Win, a Latina vision for a new American democracy, edited by my good friend, Diana Campoamor. And so it's my job to welcome everybody here tonight and to launch an evening which is devoted to celebrating the book and hearing some of the voices from the book. I've been reading it. Its origin story, by the way, I'm happy to say, was in a lunch that Diana and I had a couple of years ago when she talked about wanting to do a book of this kind, wanting to bring voices and diverse perspectives from this community into the public sphere on issues of the day. And the title, If We Want to Win, was chosen very advisedly and is meant to connote the centrality of the Latina people to public conversations in the United States and around the world. And the book delivers on that promise with a variety of authors, many of whom you're going to hear from tonight, talking about politics, about culture, about women's rights, about criminal justice, the environment, philanthropy. It's really worth spending time with. And it's very important, I think, and one of the reasons we're launching it in this way tonight, to make sure that it gets as widespread currency as possible. So we'll be saying this a number of times during the evening, but you need to promote it on social media. You need to tell your independent booksellers to stock it. You need to tell your book clubs to discuss it. You need to tell your civic organizations to organize conversations around it. To have it, to see it come to fruition, to have kind of midwifed the connection of Diana to the New Press, I feel very proud about, and we're very proud about at the New Press, but that's just the first step. The second step is to make sure that people read it and that it influences the public conversation in the way that it's meant to, and tonight is the launch of that. So with that, let me turn it over to my good friend, Diana.
Thank you, Gara. That was a lovely introduction. Somehow my meetings with you always turn rather productive. So thank you for the introduction to the New Press. We've been very happy to collaborate with this progressive publisher. And here we are. Buenas noches a todos. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this virtual party on the eve of the publication of our book. And Gara already raised it, but I have to do it myself. Here's the baby. If We Want to Win. And I have to say, we definitely want to win. There's too much on the balance for us not to win. Before I tell you a little bit about our program, I want to thank a few of the folks that are here tonight and that were part of this process for the last 2.5 years. First of all, the contributors, and you're going to have a chance to see their names, to hear their voice, to see their excerpts in a little bit. Secondly, the funders, California Community Foundation, Ford, Rockefeller Brothers, Hispanics in Philanthropy, Casey, and a number of individual donors, and the California Endowment as well. Next, staff and consultants, both at the New Press and at Nuestra America Fund, the project that I created for this book and to support leadership, thought leadership, and new narrative. And two people that I want to thank in particular, one, Cheryl Brownstein, who was the copy editor and almost the project manager throughout the whole process, and Patty Chang, the head of Feed the Hunger Fund, who gave us a fiscal sponsorship through which we could do this project. Muchas gracias a las dos. Now, tonight, we're going to take a look at what this book entails, all of the different subjects. And yes, you know, there are many subjects, but all of them have one central theme, and that is a personal story, a community story, and a vision and a strategy for the future. We will take a look at excerpts from each of the 21 essays, and we're also in between those videos featuring the authors, we're going to hear from activists and colleagues in the field. You know, almost 3 years ago when Gara and I were talking, our country was in the midst of a human rights nightmare. We were in the moral crisis of our lives. Democracy was inches from the precipice. I don't have to tell you that. Mexican Americans, which really means all of us, whether you're Mexican or not, Mexican Americans were being scapegoated as rapists and gang members. Children and families who were fleeing violence in their countries were in cages like animals. Never mind that the violence was the consequence sometimes of US foreign policy towards those countries, policies that sadly continue today. Racism and police brutality was condoned, misogyny continued, and toxic masculinity was accepted. Asian hate crimes were on the uptick. And in that setting, many of us were saying, what more can we do? Yes, elections are important, but civic life isn't just about elections. It's about another kind of leadership day in and day out. For me, civic activism begins by drawing on my family, my story, my community, just like it is for most of you. Our stories are compelling stories. Our authentic narrative is the wellspring that helps us to animate, to energize our movement and our vision forward. And if narrative is powerful, collective narrative is even more powerful, with its diversity, its nuance, its complexity, and in some cases with its own contradictions. It is the seminal engine of effective social change. So I shared this idea with a group that is now here, that is now a part of this book. And in reaching out to friends, colleagues, artists, academics, activists of all stripes, we decided to put together this anthology that you see here today and that will be formally published tomorrow. This narrative, we believe, is an antidote to heal the wounds that we have sustained and we're still sustaining here in this country. And as we see a disturbing rise in authoritarianism in the United States, throughout the world, and in Central America, in Brazil, in Mexico, Venezuela continues to spiral, and my beloved Cuba is crying, patria y vida. We desperately need narratives and strategies to lead the way. As Cesar Chavez said a long time ago, sí se puede hacer a different path, a path for a healthy future in a pluralistic, more equitable society, a different path for domestic and global economies that don't destroy the planet, and a path for truth and reconciliation. So that's my message in this book, in my preface. And it's a message that I know all of you who collaborated on this share. So with that, let me introduce you to the guy who wrote the foreword and so vividly took us back to our family stories. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, a healer himself, a bridge builder, the head of the California Endowment, Dr. Bob Ross. Bob?
Thank you, Liana, and just thank you for your energizing, passionate, impassioned leadership on this book project. I know if the other authors were harassed by you as much as I was, that was that's how we finally got this book done. And thank you, Gara, for being our host. I can't think of anyone better suited to frame the concept of winning. You know, the title of the book is called "We Want to Win," or "If We Want to Win," and the question is, you know, win what? If we're in something to win, it presumes that we're in a battle or in a fight. And I think, Diana, you mentioned what that fight is. It's the very soul of this nation, in terms of what certainly what the Trump presidency has meant. And for me, when Diana asked me to do this, and I have both a chapter about Beatriz Solis, who passed away last year, and I was invited to write the forward. It really pushed me to sit with my upbringing as an Afro-Latino in New York City. My father's African-American, my mother's Puerto Rican, and I had to sort of channel the Puerto Rican side of that cultural equation in preparation for this book. And I really landed in a place where I said, you know, to the extent that I've had any positive impact in this field as a philanthropic leader in social justice, it's in large part about what I saw and experienced in my kitchen table with my grandma. You know, that term that Cesar Chavez popularized, Si Se Puede, it's about agency. It's about voice, it's about power, it's about activism of the most marginalized. I'm having an impact on society. The other thing that was important, aside from agency, I think Gara, I would submit that we shorthanded at the California Endowment, we call it ABC, agency and belonging drives change, right? Power and activism in the spirit of inclusion, a spirit of full inclusion, drives change. And not just values, they're actually pieces of a strategy. And I think many of us, particularly those of you who are Latin or Latinx, you know, I wonder, do I run this foundation in a way that my abuela would be proud? Would I make her proud? Am I driving and pushing agency, the Si Se Puede, we can do it attitude? Am I driving and supporting a spirit of full and complete inclusion at the kitchen table, where everyone is invited, and it doesn't matter how much is in the pot, everyone's going to get something to eat, right? And so that's kind of where the place that I took, at least where I went with the forward was that upbringing, and how it's so important for us as persons of color generally, and as Latinos and Latinas in particular, to bring that spirit of full inclusion and those values into the field of philanthropy and not check them at the door because we're trying to pretend that we're something else. We're at our best in philanthropy when we bleed with the people who are hurting. And when we're proximate to that pain and proximate to injustice and channeling those that are the victims of oppression, not just actually as victims, but as architects for a different kind of future. Right? And so that's kind of the orientation I came at with my forward, and then in the chapter, and I'll close. I featured Beatriz Solis, who was a leader at our foundation, worked for me for a dozen years, and the impact she had on our foundation. Reminding me if my abuela was a program officer at a foundation, she would have been Beatriz Solis. Kitchen table, everyone's included, channeling the voices and experiences of the marginalized and the oppressed, be they migrants or immigrants or dreamers and undocumented, and channeling that into the grant-making strategies of the California Endowment, resulting in, back to the title of the book, Diana, If We Want to Win, winning battles in schools, in health, in justice reform, in immigration. And so I'm really proud of all the contributors. It's a great read. You'll hear a variety of perspectives about what it takes to win. And thank you so much, Diana, again, for your incredible and passionate leadership on this book.
you, Bob. You know, with leaders like this, I think we are going to win. And with stories like this, your abuela and mine, and so many of the heroes in our communities, this book at the end has a primer, you know, a worksheet. And the reason we put that in was because this is a call to action to all Latinos and Latines, and you know, to especially the next generation, to begin to add to this narrative. So with that, I want to begin with the first section of the book, Engagement in Civic Life. And we have these little videos that we're going to run. They're going to show you the titles. And I think here it is. Here's the first section of our book. That gives you a flavor for the first section, and there's 4 more. But before we move through the rest of the videos, I want to invite my friend and colleague, who is an expert on civic life, Arturo Vargas, you know, just to say a few words. Hola, Arturo.
Hola, Diana, ¿me escuchas?
Yes, I hear you.
Salud. Felicidades.
Gracias, gracias, gracias. Yes.
Taking advantage of this bottle of Pinot Noir that I got sent over.
All right. You know,
All right,
from a
so-
good Mexican family, by the way.
I hope we'll hear more about them. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. And it's great to see my friends Gara and Bob as well. And to reflect a little bit about the chapter on civic engagement, which anybody who knows Arturo Vargas knows that's pretty much what he has spent his whole life doing. His whole career is promoting civic engagement. And I will just challenge us on one little thing regarding the title, If We Want to Win. Let's not forget, we have won so many battles already. And we have to recognize and celebrate those victories about where we have come over the past 30, 40, 50 decades, and what our predecessors have done to get us to this point. And all the essays in the civic engagement section tell a very important story about the progress of Latino civic engagement. But I have to say that the most delightful and inspiring one for me was the one by Rhode Island Secretary of State and my very good friend, Nelly Gorbea. It was so much fun and inspiring to read about the trajectory that she had to elected office, which included creating and developing the Rhode Island Political Action Committee. You know, it was for one of that organization's very first events that Secretary Gorbea invited me to be the keynote speaker. This was about 25 years ago. The topic was why Latinos should develop political power. So I remember the event vividly. It was very well attended with lots of energy in the room of Latinas and Latinos looking to change the political landscape and trajectory of their state. And I was right in the middle of my remarks when the mayor of Providence, who was not a Latino at the time, there has since been at least 2 Latino mayors of Providence, Rhode Island, arrived very late. He missed the scheduled time for welcoming remarks. He entered the room. He came up to me, took over the microphone, and he went on and on and on and on. I don't remember what he had to say, but I know that the topic wasn't what we were there to discuss that night. So once he finished and left, I was given back the microphone. And all I needed to say to make my point that night was, and that is why we need to develop Latino political power. And look what our community in Rhode Island has achieved since then. Bravo. Now, let's see the state elect its first Latina governor and Latina elected lieutenant governor in 2022. Gracias, Diana.
Adelante, adelante. Very good. Thank you, Arturo. You know, that's already one particular fight that we will definitely win. Congratulations, Nelly, for all you've done so far. And we will be supporting you and many others, and not just Latino candidates, but candidates who support and understand Latinos. And now let's turn to women's issues as our future. And let's listen to Anjanette Delgado, who's talking about domestic violence in our families, and to Carmen Barroso. And here it is. Indeed, women issues are our issues. And so we have with us Carmen Barroso, the former head of the International Planned Parenthood for Latin America and the author of that last essay. And also, Carmen from Portland, Oregon, and my colleague Gracia Goya from Mexico City, who has worked for almost a decade, on women's issues. Carmen, let me give you the floor so that you can say a few words and then Gracia.
Thank you, Diana. Fantastic to be here with you today celebrating this. We all want to win, of course, and we have won some, but we need to win much more. So in our chapter, we show the importance of gender equality and body autonomy for building democracy. And both in Latin America and the US, we saw some progress in violence against women and in access to sexual and reproductive health and rights and justice. But the progress has been unequal and incomplete. In practically all aspects of life, brown, indigenous, Black, lesbians, trans, disabled, young, and poor women continue to have their rights disrespected. Today's increasing economic inequality and intersectional systemic injustice are feeding the rise in authoritarianism. One of the main weapons for galvanizing support for anti-democratic ideas and presidential candidates has been a panic around the so-called gender ideology. At the same time, the ideas of racial and gender justice have inspired more egalitarian personal relationships among the youth and emerged in multiple protests and national movements. We drew lessons from 3 extraordinary teaching moments for policies and advocacy: the defeat of Trump, the COVID pandemic, and the Green Wave, the movement in Argentina that legalized abortion in that Catholic country. One of the lessons is that women's movement need to fight racism and economic inequality, and other movements need to fight sexism and gender inequality. The multiple benefits of gender equality for both men and women need to be high on the agenda of any movement in defense of democracy. That is in an upshot our message in our chapter. Now I turn to Gracia Goya, the Vice President of Hispanics and Philanthropy.
Thank you, Carmen. Buenas noches a todos. I'm Gracia Goya, VP for Latin American with Hispanics in Philanthropy, speaking to you from Mexico City. As Carmen already said, women in Latin America are facing one of the most challenging moments in recent history. However, at the same time, women across Latin America are taking the lead and raising their voices to build a more inclusive region. All of them are an inspiration. We have seen young women fighting for the right to defend their bodies and reproductive rights from Chile to Mexico, calling for justice and for protection, being every day more visible and more brave. The future is female, and if we want to win, brings the opportunity to think about how to build a new and better America, not only for women, but for all. And by America means from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego. Thank you, Diana, for keeping us inspired about the huge possibilities to share and connect across the Americas. Thank you.
Both the ones that were born in the United States and those of us that were born in other parts of the Americas. Let's turn now to the 3rd section of our book, Latina Perspectives, which includes health, an homage to our dear Beatriz Solis, education, written by Monica Lozano, criminal justice, Julio Marcial, environment with Mary Skelton Roberts, arts and culture with Olga Garay, and last, a profile of Manuel Arango, a very important, significant philanthropist in Mexico. Let's roll. Wonderful. So let me introduce Julio Copo and Salvador Longoria, who are going to comment on the third section of our book. Julio, desde México. You have to
Hola
unmute.
Diana.
Hola, ¿cómo
Hola
estás?
Diana. Bien, muy bien. Felicidades. Very happy to
Gracias.
be here. I'm Julio Copo, speaking to you from Valle de Bravo in the state of Mexico. I'm an attorney in private practice, a trustee at HIP, Malinalco Community Foundation, and the Friends of the Mexican Museum. There is a BM and an AM in philanthropy in Mexico. Before Manuel and after Manuel. Manuel Arango and the many institutions he created for the common good in Mexico are an enormous legacy for my generation and for all of us in philanthropy, as well as for the future of a democratic society in Mexico. As we cope with pandemics, with violence, and the lack of equity in our society, we need institutions of the third sector to speak out on behalf of common citizens. It cannot be just Estado y Mercado. The voice of regular citizens in third sector institution must be an intrinsic part of the new narrative for an inclusive, equitable democracy in Mexico. Gracias, Manuel, por su ejemplo y por su legado. Felicidades por un reconocimiento muy merecido en esta nueva antología. Los esperamos en enero para celebrar juntos.
Diana, you're muted.
About,
Oh.
okay,
Yeah, okay now.
all right. Sal,
Okay,
you have the floor.
thank you so much.
You have just gone through a climate change. Tell us about it.
Well, I wanted to thank you and thank New Press for this opportunity. And your book really deals on so many topics that are crucial for our times and for the Latino communities. And you're right. I was going to be taping from my bedroom where the ceiling is still caved in, and I still have a blue tarp over my roof. When I was a kid here growing up in New Orleans, we had hurricanes every few years. Now it seems like every year we're in the cone of danger, and every other year we have a hurricane. And August 29th, we just got past Hurricane Ida, and I still have 2 rooms uninhabitable in my house and a blue tarp over my roof. As you may or may not know, I'm an attorney. I'm also an activist like Julio, and I am a former chairman of the Regional Transit Authority for New Orleans, so that the topic of transit and dealing with transit as a climate issue within the context of Latinos is also something important to me. Latinos are living in the states and in the coastal cities that are most affected by climate change. I think that your call to have us front and center in terms of planning and in terms of decision-making in issues of climate crisis and climate change is something that needs to be heeded, Diana. Again, there is just so much to be done in terms of including us in the dialogue and having our voice and our perspective heard in terms of the discourse and the planning in terms of climate change and things like that. I just wanted to thank you for including the topic of the environment and Ms. Skelton for the transportation issue, which is crucial. But again, I think your book is a great compilation. I think it's a roadmap for how we will win and for victory in the future. And thanks for thinking about the environment and those of us that are still living under tarp roofs. Thank you.
A lot of work to do in New Orleans and
Oh, yeah.
elsewhere, and it's wonderful to see a Latina vision of New Orleans. So thank you, Julio. Thank you, Sal. And now to the fourth section of our book, Democracy in Our Homelands. My colleagues Alex Aquino Fike shares a compelling story of loss and also a process for moving forward. And Nelson Colon charts a future of Puerto Rico with much, much less racism and a more equitable society. It was so wonderful to see that profile on Luz Vega Marquez, who, continues to be a legend in her own time and who has given us such an amazing legacy. Let me turn to Fernando Chang Muy now for a comment on Central America and on Puerto Rico. Fernando?
Hola.
Hola,
Hola desde Philadelphia, Diana, and thank you for inviting me to be with you tonight. And first of all, congratulations on curating or editing such a roundup of contributors. And congratulations to the authors, of course, for all the individual chapters you wrote. The book does offer an exciting vision of what could be, as the title suggests, a new American democracy. As I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking that for those of you who take a break from political activism, struggles, marches, lawsuits, if you go to the theater, this anthology might make you remember a song from a play called Fiddler on the Roof, specifically a song with the lyrics, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. As we've heard, the first section shows us how we contribute to the fabric of our communities, local, state, and national issues, as Arturo Vargas shared with us about Rhode Island. And the second section highlights the backbone of our community, women, as we heard from Gracia and Carmen Barroso. And the third section deals with how we deal with life, public education, criminal justice, the environment, arts and culture, as Julio and Sal just talked about. And finally, the book concludes with two areas of focus, America del Centro and El Caribe, and the strengths, their strengths, as well as ongoing challenges. And this last section reminds us that we give. Sometimes we give to a not-for-profit, and maybe we take a tax deduction, or we give to a hospital in the home country, or we give to a cousin to go to college, but we give. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that. As someone who teaches in a university, relevant chapters will be useful to an array of university departments, from political science to history, to education, to environmental studies, women's studies, and of course, Latina studies. So hopefully the text will begin by informing us, changing attitudes, and hopefully the big one, changing behavior, so that to inspire today's students to become tomorrow's agents of change. Congratulations again, Diana, and all the authors for such a great anthology.
Thank you, Fernando. We need more professors like you. And we hope that academia, will look at this book as a resource for indeed political science, sociology, ethnic studies, and a number of other areas. So now we come to the fifth section of our book, which is, of course, Latinas are givers. And it has been my mantra, I know continues to be, the mantra for many others. And it is two articles, one by Ana Gloria Rivas Vasquez, another by my friend Ana Mari Argilagos, and a profile that I think you're going to find incredibly inspiring. Antonia Hernandez, who was my boss 35 years ago. Let's roll the video. Terrific. And now to speak, to comment on philanthropy, two experts in philanthropy, two givers themselves, Chris Cardona in New York, Aixa Beauchamp in Boston, the head of the Latino Equity Fund, which was started by a group of badass Latinos in Boston. Chris, let me start with you so that Aixa can have the last word.
Absolutely, and that's always a great position to be in. Thank you so much, Diana, for all of this leadership, and to everyone who contributed to the book. I first met Diana 25 years ago when I interviewed for a job at Hispanics in Philanthropy. And what a ride it's been. To look over the table of contents feels like a greatest hits of contributors and leaders from that quarter century. And one of the things that Diana always said back in those days, and has continued to say, is that Latinos are givers of intellectual, social, cultural, and financial capital. And the intellectual capital is on full display in the book. And one thing that stands out for me in the section on Latinas are givers is the power of owning our own narrative. Giving is a path to that, and that's a way to express that, but it's a foot in the door. I pay a lot of attention to governance of foundations and what it means to play that role. And one thing I've heard said is that the seat is not the destination. And one thing that stands out for all of the contributors and for the Latino leaders that I've known in the field is that the seat is just the beginning point. That power, you have a responsibility to wield it in an equitable, in a responsive way that grounds yourself in the community. I remember Peggy Saika from APIP several years ago saying, our HIP sister organization, saying, you know, we believed that if we got more Asian Pacific Islander folks in leadership positions, that more dollars would flow to our community. But that turns out not to be the case, because you have to exert, it doesn't happen automatically. You have to exert a certain kind of leadership. And when I look through these contributors, those are those kinds of leaders that we need, those kinds of givers of intellectual and social and cultural and financial capital. So wonderful to be with all of you and see all of these different ways in which we are owning our own authentic narratives and using philanthropy as a platform through which to express cultural values and improve our communities. Aixa, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, saludos and greetings from Boston. As Diana said, I am the co-founder and co-chair of the Latino Equity Fund. And I just want to thank you, Diana and Ana Gloria, for including my story in Latina's giving section right here. Ana Gloria did a terrific job of capturing my story, which is the story of many Latinos about the values that shape why we do what we do. For me, as some of you might have read in the book, my family came from humble beginnings. My father was an entrepreneur, and sometimes he had good years and sometimes he had bad years. But one thing that never, ever, ever failed is he would buy school supplies for the young girls who were my friends and lived on my street. Every year we'd haul off to Woolworth, which is like a Walmart. And now if you know Woolworth, I'm dating myself, and buy school supplies for my friends. And often my sister and I would get upset because that meant less for my sister and I. We had to share our bounty of school supplies with 7 other girls. But this gesture forever left an imprint in my upbringing about giving back, no matter how small. And these stories, as Chris said, and as we're all saying here, are often part of our narrative. And we do what we do because of them, because of those values that we had and we were brought up with. I hope with 3 boys, I can share those values with him and with my own community. So thank you for capturing these stories, Ana Gloria and Diana, and including them in your book.
Aixa, you know, a plug for the Latino Equity Fund in Boston. You don't have to live in Boston to be a giver, by the way. And I hope to become a donor to the Latino Equity Fund. We need more funds like that. And so we've come to the end of the book. We have one more story, which is the story of the Robledo family, which made the wine that some of you received. It's a story like the American story. These are folks who came as farm workers from Mexico in the 1960s who are making award-winning wines, which I hope you're enjoying. So a couple of things. We're going to have a toast. If there are any of you that want to offer comments, this is the time to do it. And if not, we're going to have a toast. We're going to celebrate today. Tomorrow the book goes out. Please share it through your social media feeds and your colleagues and others. And if there are no other comments, I want to turn it over to my colleagues. Oh, here's Cynthia Chavez. Cynthia. You're on mute, Cynthia.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Cynthia Chavez, and I just am so inspired by the comments this evening that I have to just chime in briefly to say thank you so much for this. Deanna, I remember a little over 2 years ago when you approached me about this concept of a book, and I've just been thrilled to contribute particularly to Douglas Patiño's profile of man of greatness. And I'm just inspired to say a couple of quick comments. Dr. Ross, when you mentioned agency plus belonging drives change, I just want to offer a friendly addition to that, maybe include agency, belonging, and connectedness. Connectedness drives change. And I think of that because of, as a young Chicana from East LA, thinking of my grandmother, inspired by your comments, Robert Ross, my Nana Cota, and how my mother, my tias, my grandparents really modeled this deep connection and love through what, you know, are often potlucks and gatherings where people bring their favorite dishes, and you have, as Fernando said, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, these different flavors. And for me, this book is like a banquet. It's a banquet of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some of the best stories of leadership and legacy, struggle and triumph. So I just want to say these few words of tribute to Deanna for having this vision, and to all of everyone who contributed to this feast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob, Gara, do you want to toast?
Yeah, I got the glass of wine. I've got the book here. You know, I've known Deanna for 20 or more years since I was on her advisory board at HIP. She was a visionary and creative and innovative person then, and she still is. And that is what brought about this book. And at the New Press, we really strongly believe that books remain central to the dissemination of ideas and movements in this country. It's been proven again and again. And I think this book can be a really instrumental part of that. So we're proud to publish it. I'm proud to be part of this event. Run out and buy it, make all your friends buy it, and let's raise a glass to the magnificent achievement that's represented here.
Thank you. Bob, any last words?
Just want to thank you, Deanna, for your energy, your passion. Gara, thank you so much, my friend. And just to keep an eye on the future here, 2026, July 4th, 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. We need a new declaration for our nation. That Declaration of Independence was written by white guys in an enslaved America. And so this book gives us a roadmap to a new social contract for what it means to be an American in this nation, and at our 250th anniversary. And I hope we can mark that on our calendars and celebrate full, true, authentic, deep, profound inclusion in America for everyone at that time. And thank you, Deanna, for your leadership in helping us put this roadmap together.
Gracias, Bob. Thank you, everyone. Felicitaciones a todos. We have one last video and then the program will be over. How un-Latino of us to actually be on time. Salud y adelante.